Hey everyone. Today we're going to be talking about revolutions and not like the American Revolution or any other type, but revolving objects in Onshape. Okay, so if you take a look at the assignment, there are four drawings that I've given you guys at this point. We're going to go through all of these today in this order. The first one is going to be the tube. Then we're going to draw the cup. Then we're going to draw the sphere. And then lastly, we're going to draw the post. Okay. All of these things, when you submit them to me, should be done in a revolution. Okay. So some of these, like we could easily extrude these objects too, but I'm really trying to teach you guys how to revolve an object. Okay. So please use the revolve tool for all of these today. So we're going to begin. I'm already in my folder in Onshape. So I'm going to create a new document today, okay, because this is associated with our new assignments. And we're back. So you're going to name this assignment 4.8. You could even say like 4.8 revolution, something like that. Okay, doesn't really matter, but 4.8. Okay, so we're going to draw all four of these objects in the same document, the same way we did when we drew like the 12 objects. Okay, so first of all, like what is a revolve? So a revolve is the process where we take like a closed object, like let's say this circle, right? And we revolve that around an axis, let's say this straight line. When I click check and I hit Shift 7 here, you know, we've already learned about the extrude tool, but here's the revolve tool. So the first thing it asks me is like, what is the solid that I want? So this is the thing that I want to revolve. Then it asks me, what is my revolution axis? So you have to draw these axes in, and that's what this vertical line is for. So I'm going to select this. Now I can select my axis. And now I've produced this like life ring or donut or something like that, right? I could even say like, okay, instead of it being full, I could create a degree. You know, I could say like, oh, I want this thing to be like 180 degrees or something like that. And I could create like half of a circle, right? So now when we go through and look at this, we have this like object that has been revolved, right? We took the circle and we revolved that circle around the center point and produced a 3D object from like the path that that circle has made. Okay, so again, today we're going to go through and produce a couple different shapes. So I'm just going to delete both of my sketches so I can start fresh again. And since I'm starting fresh again, I want to make sure that I'm starting in my front view because I want to draw on my front. Okay, so I'm going to start in the front view and I'm going to create a sketch. So one thing that's important to recognize is that when we revolve around, like, say, the center point, half of the object is going to be to the right of that center point, and half of the object is going to be to the left of that center point. Okay, so when you go to draw a revolution, what you really want to draw is your revolution axis is always going to be a straight line, and you really, like, 99 times out of 100, I guess I can't say always, but almost always, your revolution axis is going to be around about your origin. So you want to draw a straight line that is attached to that origin. Okay, that's really the best way to do it. And it could go above and below. It could simply go above. It does not matter. But you want to make sure that you have a line starting on the origin and going directly up or directly over. All of these are going to go up today. But again, it depends on like which way you want to revolve something. Like if you wanted to revolve something vertically, you draw it vertical. If you wanted to revolve something horizontally, you would draw it horizontal. So that's a revolved axis, okay? The other thing about this, and again, we're working here on tube. So again, we really only care about the radius of this object. If you think about like this center line here, or what this section line here, this is called the section line. We've cut the object in half. Here we can see the section, and we can see like the thickness of the tube on the left and on the right, and then like the open area that wasn't cut through down the middle. Um, and really all we care to draw is what is, imagine that this line here is our axis that we just drew vertically. We really only need to draw this rectangle over here and then revolve that rectangle 360 degrees to produce this overall object. So we need to know a couple of different things. And this first one I've made it pretty easy for us. The thickness of the wall is 1/4 of an inch. It says it right here. We also could do some math and figure this out too, right? I tell you that the diameter of this circle is 3 inches. The diameter of the circle in here is 2.5. That means that 3 minus 2.5, that's 1/2 of an inch. But half of that 1/2 of an inch is over here, and half of that 1/2 of an inch is over here. So 1/2 divided by 2 is 1/4 of an inch, or 0.25. The other way that we could do that, and honestly, maybe the easier way, is just start converting these things to the radius to begin with. This is really like 1.5 inches radius. This is really 1.25 inches radius, and 1.5 inches minus 1.25 inches is 1/4 of an inch. Okay, that's the other way to do it. The other thing that we need to know is like how far away, again, these things are from the center. So the outside of this is 1.5 inches from the center, because again, this is the diameter. We need to know the radius, 1.5 inches. And the overall height of this thing is 3 inches. Okay, so I have enough information now. I'm gonna press the G key for two-sided rectangle. And we're going to do a couple different things, right? So A, we know that the thickness of this thing is 1/4 of an inch. We just did the math for that. We know that the height of this thing is going to be 3 inches. Now, the distance, again, from the center line to the outside of this object, it said that the diameter was 3 inches. So the radius, again, is 1.5 inches. And again, even if you didn't label this as 1/4, and this thing is now like floating, you can now dimension between here and here. You could say that that's 1.25 inches, and then you don't even have to do the math if you don't want to, right? But doing the math is usually faster. But that's another way that you can handle this, okay? One thing to note, and this is a mistake the students are making, so it's pretty important to recognize. Let's say that I dimension that at 0.25. See, this line is now black, which means it cannot be moved. Okay, so when I go to dimension between here and here, it's going to tell me what that dimension is. Let's say that I try to change that dimension. Notice that it turns red. Okay, and that's because the dimension is broken. 2 plus 1/4 is greater than 1.5. So like it literally can't do it. You're telling it two separate rules at the same time, two like commands, do this, and they don't equal each other. So you kind of want to pick one, or again, when you do the math and you say like, okay, well, this is equal to 1.25, then as long as they add up, it won't really be an issue. The reason why this is gray is because it's what's called a driven dimension, which means that if I change this active dimension on the right, it forces my driven dimension to automatically change. So this dimension down here and this dimension here and this dimension here, these are all active dimensions. I can physically change the size of the object. But this dimension, because I already have these two things, dimensions, it just automatically becomes a driven dimension, and we can't edit that. Otherwise, again, it's going to break our sketch. So we just leave that and it'll change. Okay, so that's more drafting stuff, but sketching lessons than revolving, but nonetheless, here we are. So we have this object here. Again, the outside, the radius was 1.5 inches. The inside, the radius was 1.25 inches. The height of the cup is 3 inches. And you're like, yeah, but that's not a cup. It's just like this random rectangle. Like, what's up with that? When we hit the check mark and we go to, again, revolve, which is probably, what key is revolve? I don't know, R maybe. Let's see. R, Shift R. I don't know, I gotta figure that out. When we go through here, I'm going to first select my face that I want to revolve, and then I have to select revolve axis, and now I have to select the axis to revolve around, which is that line. Okay, make sure that you select that button, otherwise it won't work. And again, in this case, looking at the drawing, oh, wrong thing, looking at the drawing, this thing went around 360 degrees. So we are going to leave that at 360 and say check. Okay, and just like before, we're going to turn the visibility off on our planes. And I am just going to rename this thing tube. Check. Okay, let's move on to the next. We're going to get a little faster moving forward here. Okay, so we're going to create another part studio. So let's take a look at the drawing here. This is cup. So cup and tube are very similar. Cup is 4 inches tall and has an 1/8 inch thick wall. The diameter overall is 2 inches, and it does have a bottom. Okay, the thickness down there is the same as the side. So it has a bottom. So here again, I'm going to sketch here. And again, you could do this in extrusions, but you shouldn't be. Okay, everything should be done in, it's weird, sketch here. Okay, everything should be done with revolutions. So in this case, I'm going to draw the general shape of my cup. Okay, which is going to be, in this case, again, we're basing everything from the origin. So we're going to revolve around the origin. So I started at the origin. The thickness of the cup is 0.125. The height of the cup is 4. And the diameter of the cup was 2. So then the radius must be half of that, which is 1. Okay, so I'll select that and I'll say 1. Now in this case, I could draw an axis. That would be fine. Technically, though, I already have a little vertical line at the origin, right? I have like this part of the cup here, so I can use that also. But it has to be a vertical line at your origin to be able to like share it. So when I go through and revolve, funny enough, there isn't a shortcut for revolve, so no shortcut required, I guess. So we're going to come up to the revolve. We are going to select, again, our object. Then we need to tell it what axis we're going to use. And again, I can select any of these lines, right? So watch. So if I select this line, I make my cup, right? So that's obviously, oops, that's what we want. We want to revolve this object around this line and check mark. That gives me my cup, right? I can see inside that I have a bottom and all that type of stuff, right? Like let's say that we deleted that. Again, because you got to pick, right, the right thing. When I go to revolve, I can select the same object, but now like my axis, I could say revolve it around that axis. But now instead of making a cup, I've made like a disc with a little pin in it. So obviously that's not what we want either. Okay, so we have our cup. And again, we want to turn off all of this stuff. So I turn that off and there's my cup. And again, if you notice, my origin is directly in the center of my cup at the bottom because that's where I built my object from. Okay, in this case, you kind of want to revolve around that origin. Okay, so rename cup. All right, moving on to the next. Okay, so sphere, this is our sphere. Okay, so the sphere itself, when we look at this, when you look at this drawing, it just looks like two circles, right? But remember, this is the front view of your circle, this is the right view of your circle, and a three-dimensional circle is a sphere. So this sphere is 3 inches in diameter. So sphere is pretty easy to draw. Again, in here, we're going to create a new sketch. We're going to create a new sketch on this plane here. And in this case, it's going to be a circle, and that circle is going to start at the origin. Okay, so start it at your origin. And again, the diameter of this thing here is 3 inches. Now, you might be saying, I thought that we were dealing with radiuses. That's true. The reality is we only want half of this circle. Okay, so we're going to draw a vertical line down the center of the circle. And then I taught you how to trim the other day. We're going to use a trim tool, and we're going to cut this. Then we have half of a circle, right? And the overall diameter was 3 inches originally. But now we can see that the radius is 1.5 inches. And again, that's a driven dimension because we've already defined the size of this thing. So that's just like confirming. So we click check, Shift 7. Again, I can like turn all of this stuff off now. When I go to revolve this, again, I'm going to revolve this. I'm going to revolve it around the center axis. And again, I can make a sphere. I could say that I wanted this to go in one direction for say like 200 and like whatever, 30 degrees. And it will fill around and fill that in. We could change the direction if we wanted to. Like if we wanted it to rotate the opposite way, we could do that. But again, more often than not, you're probably going to use the full option for revolving things. So there's our full sphere. And then the last thing that we're going to be working on today is creating the post. So again, create a new studio. We're going to create a sketch on the front plane. And in this case, we're going to draw the post, which if you recognize this thing, it's not exactly like a drawing that we've done before, but it's similar to a drawing we've done before. And we're going to be doing one of those drawings, a couple of those drawings again this week. So I wanted to start you guys off with something like this. So here we have like this post. It has a bigger diameter on the bottom, smaller diameter on the top. And again, you could totally do this with a extrusion, but we're going to do it with a revolution instead today. We have 1/2 inch for this bottom plate, 2.5 inches for the top, 1 inch for the middle, and 2.5 for the outside. So again, the radius here, but the heights are going to be full. So when I go through to draw this, let's see if I can recall those dimensions. Well, I'll just draw the whole object first, roughly. So, or like half of the object, okay? So here's half of my object. I know that the top was supposed to be 0.5. I know that the, maybe no is a bit of a strong word. 2.5, so yeah, cool. So this is the other thing too to show you guys. You can actually use this as a calculator. So I can even type in that number, 2.5. Then I can hit like the backslash, the divided by sign, and 2. And it'll do the math for you, so that's another way that you can do that. Again, kind of slower. If you can do the math, it's faster, but that's one way to do it too. What was that, 1/2 inch and then 2.5 inches overall. Cool. So I can now dimension this to be 2.5. Boom. All right, so there's all of my dimensions. Again, the overall diameter is 2.5, so I have 1.25 inches. The overall the diameter of the top part is 1 inch, so I have that at 1/2. half an inch high and 2.5 inches long. So again, I finished this sketch. Shift and 7, and I go to revolve this thing around this vertical axis. So there it is. We've now created 4 separate revolve drawings. We have our tube, we have our cup, we have our sphere, and we have our post. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that this is in your shared folder with me, and then you're going to hit the mark as done button in the assignments. And then you're going to move on to the next assignment here, 4.9, where you're producing a 3D model and a two-dimensional drawing, which will be coming up to, of that object to turn into me. Make sure the 4.9 is also created in your shared folder with me. Okay. So today we reviewed the Revolve tool. We did a little bit of a deeper dive into like dimensioning things and the difference between like an active dimension and a driven dimension. We showed like how we can revolve things 360 degrees, or we can revolve things, partially. We showed how we can revolve things like with gaps in the middle, like in the tube and kind of the cup. We showed how we can revolve solids like the sphere and the post. And later on, we can use this to really like do a lot of drawings. And again, although sometimes it might be simpler to just use the the extrude tool, and other times it's much simpler just to use the revolve tool. Like you can get a lot done in one step with the revolve tool, where sometimes it takes more steps with the revolve tool. With the extrusion tool. And more importantly, there will be objects like if we were to draw a donut, which can't be drawn any other way but to revolve. Same thing with the sphere. There's literally no other way to draw a sphere than to use the revolve tool. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, when you get done with this, turn it in and move on to 4.9. All right, bye-bye.